This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Heather Sells. A second day of Arctic temperatures and rolling blackouts across Middle America as winter weather freezes over entire regions. The dangerous conditions are putting millions of people and infrastructures at risk. Caitlin Burke has our report.
Extreme cold poses a new threat to residents in the South as millions are without electricity and the region's power grid is at risk of failing.
The next few days are going to be very tough. To those who have lost power, I know you are frustrated, I know you're miserable, I know you're uncomfortable. I know it is very miserable in this cold without heat.
Those who haven't lost power are being asked to conserve their energy, and power officials in Texas and 14 other states using controlled rolling blackouts in an effort to save the grid, something that's never happened before.
It's cold, kids around, trying to stay warm, fireplace, there's no firewood anywhere, no stores open.
Officials say new generation power sources like wind turbines have completely frozen over and been taken offline. And even more traditional power generation methods have started to fail in the ultra-cold temperatures. Meanwhile, all of this is playing out in the middle of a pandemic, and vaccine storage facilities are also losing power.
The vaccine had reached a temperature that it needed to be distributed and in arms within 12 hours. We began immediately upon notification mounting a vaccine campaign unexpectedly because we're in the middle of disaster.
Travel conditions also remain a problem, as many areas have solid layers of ice coating roadways. In Tennessee, this pickup truck pulls out of a driveway and then slides sideways down the street. In Mississippi, at least 5 18-wheelers involved in this pileup. And in Texas, a man standing by this SUV barely escaped after a second car came flying down an embankment. Overnight, a tornado generated by the winter storm destroyed homes in a North Carolina town, killing at least 3 people. As of this morning, more than 70% of the continental U.S. is covered in snow, and weather officials say more than 50 million people could see temperatures dip below zero over the next several days. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
AccuWeather meteorologists say some of the hardest hit parts of the country will get a second wallop this week. AccuWeather maps show the coming storm will cover a 2,000-mile-long stretch from Texas to Maine during the middle and latter part of this week, bringing another 6 to 12 inches of snow. It also carries with it a threat of more icing conditions, making things miserable for people at home and those who have to drive. It also brings with it the possibility of extended power outages. The National Commander of the Salvation Army, Commissioner Kenneth Hodder, joins us now to talk about helping people hit hard by this polar vortex. Commander, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Heather. It's great to be with you.
Well, I want to ask you, there's of course so many communities struggling with the weather right now. Where are you focusing your efforts?
Well, the Salvation Army has 7,600 locations around the country, almost in every zip code of the United States. So wherever this cold is a problem, the Salvation Army is doing everything it can to help. That will range from Poughkeepsie, New York, to Chicago, to Dallas. Wherever people are in need, the Salvation Army is there.
All right, and tell us about the types of services that you're providing with so many needs right now.
Well, right now, the Salvation Army is opening or assisting with a number of cold weather shelters and warming centers. We're distributing hot food through our mobile canteens and through our existing facilities. We're even distributing clothing to the community. This will be individuals who might need clothing just to stay warm, even in their own homes, as well as those on the street. We're feeding first responders, and we're also providing emergency transportation for people who are stranded.
Wow. And what is your outlook at this point? How long do you expect to be offering these services?
The Salvation Army is already in all of these communities. We don't have to bring in people. We're already there. So we will be able to help and ready to help for as long as the emergency exists in any particular place.
All right, and talk a little bit about you providing these services in the midst of a pandemic. What does that look like?
Over the course of the past year, of course, the Salvation Army has seen an explosion in the number of requests for assistance that we've received, particularly amongst the most vulnerable. For those who are homeless, the pandemic was laid on top of an epidemic. Well, this storm has created a third layer of challenge for them. So the Army is trying to get to the people who are cold and help them. In Poughkeepsie, as I mentioned earlier, the Salvation Army is even wrapping scarves and gloves around light poles so that people who are homeless in any particular part of that city will have access to good, warm clothing.
In addition to the homeless, what other groups or demographics are you finding are really in need right now during this storm?
Last year, there were an additional 10 million people who lost their jobs in our country. And as a consequence, there are lots of people who, though they might be in their own homes, are not able to pay their utility bills. They're cold. It's dark. They need emotional support. They need spiritual support. They also need the ability to get hot food for their children. So if they have a need, please contact the Salvation Army in your community, and we'll get there to help you.
Yeah, those pictures that you're showing are just so gripping, and our hearts really go out to those who are suffering in the cold on top of everything else. Commander Hodder, with the Salvation Army, we appreciate your time. Thank you for your ministry.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
A spike in crime rates is forcing Minneapolis to scrap its plans to defund the city's police department. The city council voted to not only refund the department, but gave it $6.4 million in additional money following complaints over lawn police response times. The Twin Cities reported a 22% spike in violent crimes last year after more than 200 police officers quit or retired from the force following months of riots. The council had initially voted to defund the police amid widespread protests following the death of George Floyd. Leaders of a movement to recall California Governor Gavin Newsom say they have the 1.5 million signatures needed to force a special statewide election. Recall Newsom 2020 is working to get even more before a March deadline. Recall leaders say they are unhappy with Newsom's response to the pandemic, including statewide lockdowns on businesses and churches. Experts say to win the special election, Republicans would have to unite behind one candidate who could beat Newsom. Well, in New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo faces growing criticism and calls for an investigation or his resignation. The backlash centers around his decision to move infected COVID patients into nursing homes last March.
I understand the public had many questions and concerns, and the press had many questions about nursing homes primarily. And I understand that they were not answered quickly enough.
Families of the patients and even fellow Democrats believe Cuomo should not have done it and should not have withheld information about the number of deaths. Families want to know if their loved ones could have been saved. Fox News' Janice Dean lost both of her in-laws and has been speaking out for months. She is calling for an independent, bipartisan investigation into the governor and his administration.
He is a liar. He just continues to lie and deflect and blame everyone else. I am calling on every single lawmaker in Albany and also on the federal level. Do you not see what is happening right now? Do you not care about all of the people in New York State that want to find out why their loved ones died in nursing homes? He didn't follow the science. You don't put infected patients into nursing homes. That is the bottom line, Governor.
Democratic Assemblywoman Alessandra Biaggi tweeted to New Yorkers watching Cuomo's press conference, "It is riddled with lies, theater, and deflection." President Biden is helping families struggling financially during the coronavirus pandemic by extending the ban on housing foreclosures. The ban is now extended 90 days and will expire on June 30th. It allows borrowers extra time to request a pause or reduction in mortgage payments. Census figures show 12% of homeowners late on their payments right now. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is moving to form an independent commission to investigate the January 6th attack on the Capitol. That is in response to bipartisan calls for an inquiry. Pelosi said the panel will investigate the facts and causes leading up to those events, including those relating to the interference of the transfer of power. Meanwhile, several House Republicans sent a letter to Speaker Pelosi asking her to explain what security precautions were taken before the attack. Coming up, reaction to the report on sexual abuse by Ravi Zacharias and what believers and ministries can learn from it.
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
I think as a father, it's my job, to lead, just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Many Christians have been rocked in the last week by a report from Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. The ministry says that it has found claims of sex abuse by the late Zacharias to be true. It has apologized to his victims and pledged to reform the ministry. Attorney Boz Chividjian is a longtime advocate for sex abuse survivors, and he joins us now with more. Boz, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Heather. Good to be here.
I appreciate it. A lot of people do seem to be talking about this case. You have watched so many cases similar to this unfold over the years, but I'm wondering, do you think that this particular one is getting more attention than previous ones in the Christian world?
Well, Heather, I wish all of them would get attention. This one should have had attention back in 2016, 2017, when it first surfaced. Ravi and others around him were successful in largely keeping it quiet. I was an attorney that was representing one of the victims in this matter. And I think I'm glad to hear, at least now, years later, even though it's too late, in my opinion, in many ways, that it's finally coming to the surface. I mean, God is in the business of bringing darkness to light. And sometimes we want that light to come sooner than it does. But I'm glad it does, because that's when I think true healing, especially in the lives of those who've been so hurt by him and this organization, can continue on their road to healing in a much more hopeful way.
Right. I want to ask you about where things stand now and where they might go going forward. The RZIM board has apologized for not holding Zacharias accountable and for not believing his victims, and it's pledged to care for them and move forward with organizational reform. What are your thoughts on these steps?
I mean, I think those are good words. I always say in these types of situations, and that's not just limited to RZIM, let's wait to see what happens. Let's wait to see the action points. Let's wait to see what happens when the spotlight is no longer on the organization. Are they still as committed and determined to do the things that they're telling us now? I'm hopeful that they are. But, there's a lot of work to do. And, I had a friend of mine recently tell me, she said, sometimes restoration requires destruction when the problems are systemic. And so I would also say that it should be a consideration for the organization as to whether or not they continue. Maybe they take the time and the resources that they have currently and put those towards helping and identifying and serving those who've been so decimated by the man who the ministry was named after.
Right. And can you talk just a little bit, Boz, about spiritual abuse? Because what was happening here was not just sexual abuse, but it was a person in spiritual authority also having spiritual conversations around this abuse with his victims, as I understand it.
Yeah, that is so destructive in so many ways. What a lot of people don't realize is when somebody in a spiritual position, in a spiritual leadership position, takes that position, exploits that position to gain the trust of vulnerable people, in gaining their trust, they will hear a lot about those individuals' lives and about their weaknesses, about their struggles, and then they gain that trust and admiration and then turn around and use it against that person. And oftentimes that person who's opened up to this spiritual leader would never dream about saying anything to anybody because of the fear about all the things that they have shared with this leader coming forward. And add on to that the fact that oftentimes these leaders are seen as representatives of God. And so how confusing is it for somebody to be groomed and abused by somebody in that type of position and then to try to even remotely have a relationship with God? It's very destructive, and it takes years and years of intense therapy and God's goodness and grace to bring healing, spiritual healing, to those types of individuals. You mentioned that you had a client involved in this RZIM case. How is that client doing now? What can you tell us about your client? Yeah, well, Lori Ann Thompson is my client, and she and her husband are, I was just telling them this morning, they are the picture of God bringing beauty out of the ashes. I read in the report this past weekend where Ravi and a colleague would laugh and say, I wonder how long they're going to remain married, maybe 6 years. And the other person said, no, 3 months, or I'm paraphrasing. And here we are years later, and God has been good to them. They are married happily. They've been to hell and back, but God is truly in the business of bringing beauty out of the ashes. And so the best thing I can tell you about Lori Ann and Brad Thompson they're amazing people who have been to hell and back, but have also seen the work of God in their life when they had lost all hope. I want to ask you, too, one detail, but it stood out to me. The board so far has remained anonymous. Do you think this will change? Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I didn't even know that the RZIM board was anonymous until the last week or two. That's crazy. I mean, if you're going to live and speak about being transparent, you start with saying who is actually running this organization. You cannot hold people accountable and even begin to discuss accountability when there's no transparency, and that begins at the board. All right, and I want to circle back on a point I mentioned earlier briefly, but do you think what is happening with RZIM will encourage other Christian organizations, faith-based groups, to perhaps take a closer look at how they run their organizations? Are you hearing anything like that at this point in time? When these types of things surface, you do hear that. The question is it sustained? Or do we sort of, like I said earlier, once the spotlight dims, do we sort of move on to sort of the status quo? Heather, I think especially in America, Christian evangelical organizations and churches really need to take a step back and to really evaluate what part of us are reflecting the very Jesus that we proclaim. When we place leaders in positions where there's no accountability, and when the leader is almost the sole resource for bringing in funds and for bringing in notoriety to the organization, we are creating a mess, and it doesn't reflect the Jesus that I know. And I think it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time within the American evangelical world to understand that, But more than understand that, to make the hard decisions to do something about that, so that we actually as organizations and churches can better reflect the character and person of Jesus, because right now, that's lacking.
A very sobering moment. Boz Tchividjian, attorney and victim advocate, thank you for your insights.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Still ahead, the call to deprogram Trump supporters and the danger it could pose to freedom of speech, conscience, and faith.
Daddy?
Yeah, buddy.
How many nickels are in a dollar?
There are 20 nickels in a dollar.
How do birds fly? Does milk really make my bones stronger?
Yeah.
Daddy, when we die, will we go to heaven?
Do you have the answer to life's biggest question? Call the 700 Club. We'll help you find answers to the important questions life brings your way.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs from health to entertainment you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. To watch the CBN News Channel, download the app or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Hello, I'm Dr. David Perlmutter, board-certified neurologist and #1 New York Times bestselling author. Wouldn't it be great to boost your energy, eliminate brain fog, and even reverse brain disease? Well, you can, and I'm going to show you how, along with some of the world's most well-respected brain experts in this DVD, Protect Your Brain.
Get Protect Your Brain, a free DVD only from the Christian Broadcasting Network, featuring experts on the cutting edge of neuroscience and brain health.
No matter how many times you've failed in the past, you really can do this.
In Protect Your Brain, you'll discover simple strategies to keep your brain young and healthy. Improve your memory. Discover the gut-brain connection. In Protect Your Brain. Get your free copy at cbn.com or call 1-800-700-7000.
If you want to improve the quality of your life, get the DVD Protect Your Brain and get it today.
Donald Trump may be out of the White House, but there is now calls for his supporters to be, quote, deprogrammed. CBN's Jennifer Wishon explains what that's about and what is at stake.
It's no secret Americans who supported the presidency of Donald Trump mystified those known as the liberal media elite. Still, many Americans gasped when a trusted news voice millions used to wake up to made this statement.
The question is, how are we going to really almost deprogram these people who have signed up for the cult of Trump?
For many citizens, it was jaw-dropping to hear something so radical from a respected journalist.
What did you think when you heard her calling for Trump supporters to be deprogrammed?
You kind of get that sinking feeling in your stomach because it's so disappointing. You're like, oh, wow, seriously?
It's a year since Fox Nation last visited the border.
Longtime journalist and former 60 Minutes correspondent Lara Logan, who now hosts her own show on Fox Nation, Lara Logan Has No Agenda, says this so-called idea is more widely accepted than you might think.
Just the idea that anyone needs to be deprogrammed is such a radical idea. And yet this is not an idea that you're hearing on the fringes, right? This is an idea that's being published in the opinion pages of the Washington Post.
She's right. This comes from Post opinion writer Brian Klaas. So do we have any hope of deprogramming the millions of Americans who are devoted to dangerous lunacy? Don't hold your breath. One in a slew of articles and commentary that accept deprogramming as a necessary response to Americans disappointed by the presidential election.
There are millions of Americans, almost all white, almost all Republicans, who somehow need to be deprogrammed. It's as if they are members of a cult, the Trumpist cult.
Logan points out she's not motivated by politics or party, rather outrage over the media's self-sustaining, sinister narrative that in some cases threatens the very lives and livelihoods of millions of citizens.
There is an entire infrastructure that is built around sustaining this narrative and targeting millions of people in this country who see the world differently and who they regard as a threat and now as illegitimate enough to have to be erased. So right now it's reprogramming or deprogramming Trump supporters. What about when it's deprogramming Christians of all kinds, including left and right? People think, well, I'm a better person than a Trump supporter, right? Because I've studied critical race theory and I voted for Joe Biden and I would never vote for Donald Trump or a horrible, nasty Republican, right? Except you go to church and God and religion is a threat to progressive, secular movement in this country. And now you need to be deprogrammed. And who's next? Who else is on the list?
I am Regent's first ROTC graduate student.
Three, two, one. I'm Ephraim Graham. Welcome to Studio 5.
Get on it.
All that's new and now in the world of uplifting entertainment with celebrity interviews.
There's a higher contribution I will make.
Musical performances. I'll give you my best praise. Plus movie and TV news.
See it and be uplifted.
On Studio 5. Every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern at cbn.com/Studio 5.
How'd you like to get a redo on your health, on your body, on your arteries, so you could have the energy you had 20 years ago? The great news is you can. I'm Dr. Mike Roizen, chair of the Wellness Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. I've written 4 New York Times bestsellers. But even better than having to read all that, you can listen to this DVD and watch it. Protect your heart? Yes, you can. Here's how.
Go to CBN.com or call 1-800-700-7000 for your free copy of Protect Your Heart. Let the medical experts show you their new discoveries on how to avoid heart disease and even reverse it. Easy steps to uncover the hidden dangers in your medicine cabinet, reduce stress, and get a complete do-over for your health. Call 1-800-700-7000. That's 1-800-700-7000. Or go to CBN.com to claim your free copy of Protect Your Heart.
National Geographic is showing respect for brilliant innovators of the past in an Emmy-winning anthology series that dramatizes their stories. The latest season is called Genius Aretha, and it will focus on American singer, songwriter, and civil rights activist Aretha Franklin.
I'm writing a new song. It's gonna hit you hard. I thought you were my man. It'll get under your skin, right down to the bone. But it's going to be a whole new vibe that brings people together.
The show centers on the life, faith, and music of Franklin, from a child prodigy in a Detroit church to an iconic soul musician. The network will premiere back-to-back episodes starting on March 21st for 4 nights. And that is it for this edition of CBN News Watch. We hope that you'll join us next time. Have a great day.